Chapter 15 of Psychopomp Drive. Written by Janeen Leese-Taylor. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. Chapter 15 The Escort.
"What under God were you thinking?"
States demanded as he paced back and forth in the center of the living room.
"You ran headfirst into danger, and for what?"
He waved his hands in the air in annoyance as he turned towards the dark-skinned NB next to him.
"I understood the newbies wanting to do this, but you should have known better."
Scrappy bared their teeth, eyes narrowing dangerously in retaliation behind their dark glasses.
"There were still humans nearby, States. You know our mission dictates that you stay alive long enough to actually protect someone,"
States interrupted. His hazel eyes were almost black with anger, the pupil expanding to take over most of the usually soothing coloration of his irises.
"You put yourselves at risk! Reckless! Irresponsible!"
"States," Micah muttered softly, a warning tone as she came up beside Scrappy and placed a hand on their arm. Scrappy's dark eyes dipped downwards as they avoided the gaze of the older man. They held their earphones in one hand, squeezing the plastic in the rhythm of a soothing song.
"You weren't there, States. The hollows were combining together. I've never seen anything like that before. We were out of options."
The man let out a heavy sigh and ran a hand back and forth over the bald cap of his head. A nervous habit.
"When the boss hears about this—"
"When I hear about what, pray tell?" Finley turned his head at the sound of the cat flap opening and closing, the dark fur of the Grim flashing by as he leapt up onto the sofa next to them. He tilted his head to one side, frowning and watching the Amarini above him expectantly. States paled under the Grim's scrutiny, turning away and muttering something under his breath. "The patrol team believes that they encountered the destroyer earlier today," Micah explained, arching an eyebrow towards Scrappy. The younger Amarini let out an anxious sigh, the beat of their drumming fingers growing faster. The cat's eyes widened as he took in each of their faces.
By the gods, are you all right? Was anyone harmed?"
"All limbs accounted for," Finley answered. Sallow jumped up beside him, standing on his hind legs as he reached out to inspect him with a paw.
"What was it like? Were you able to get a good look at it?"
"It's hard to explain," Finley carried on, catching Abby's eyes across the room. "It was like it was there, and then it wasn't."
"A living, breathing ocean of shadows,"
Spectre supplied, tying up his long white hair into a high ponytail to keep the ends of it out of his face. He curled his legs underneath himself, rocking on the chair until he was able to find a comfortable position.
"It swallowed us whole and then spat us out."
Rykart unfolded his legs, adjusted his position in the armchair, and then crossed them again. As always, he maintained a perfectly neutral expression. He leaned forward, interlinking his fingers under his chin.
"It spots you out?"
he queried. Finley remembered the thick, heavy blackness surrounding him, how the liquid had drowned out all light and sound, dragging them under like a powerful current. It was like it changed its mind, he observed uncertainly. Rykart brought both of his hands to rest against his forehead, humming contemplatively to himself, without comment.
And what of the other reported hollows at the scene? The Whisperers and the Corruptors?
Salo continued. His eyes were like beams of light glowing ethereally in the dim room.
Gone,
Finley answered. The cat started, the hair on the back of his neck spiking up in alarm.
All of them?
Finley nodded, his lips forming a thin line.
When that thing spat us out, all the hollows that we'd led there had disappeared. We can only assume that they were consumed by the destroyer.
Helvete,
Alvaro remarked.
That is definitely a tick in the not good column.
And during this attack, did you see anything out of the ordinary? Hear anything?
Salo asked, pressing his weight against the young spirit's arm. The silver-haired Amarini thought back to the moments before the appearance of the dark, shadowy being, and shook his head.
I didn't notice anything, he admitted.
Spectre did, though, Abby supplied from next to the young man in question. She reached forward to pat his shoulder, and he stirred as if from a dream. The pale spirit looked up at her with a frown, as if noticing her for the first time, before regarding the other Amarini in the room.
Yes, she spoke,
he stated.
To you?
Salo questioned. Spectre nodded.
I think she was trying to communicate with us.
You had that thing in your head, spoke Poika?
Alvaro's Swedish twang conveyed his obvious discomfort at the idea.
She asked us to leave,
the youngest Amarini continued, his white ponytail brushing against the back of his neck as he shook his head.
She said she wouldn't hurt us if we just stayed out of her way.
State's deep voice interrupted from across the room.
She must be scared, trying to negotiate with us like that.
Spectre shook his head again.
She didn't feel scared. She felt angry, like we were intruding somehow.
A bold attack like that, with 4 Amarini present. It is confident in its power. It knows we are outmatched,
Rykart surmised. Abby rolled her eyes. The two voices of doom over here, she commented, tapping her knuckles against the armchair Spectre was still occupying. It's just a hollow, like any other. We just have to catch her and exercise her. Bada bing, bada boom. Rykart adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose.
It is best we approach this with caution. We have nothing but conjecture to go on so far. We will continue working as normal.
Salo dropped back down onto all fours, walking along the back of the sofa like a tightrope walker.
We must be careful to keep this from the other spirits in the underground. If word of this gets out before we can get a firm grasp of what we are dealing with, it will likely cause a panic.
He stopped at the edge of the sofa, leaving small indents under the beans of his small toes.
I will request temporary protective details from the other gods, one to accompany each of the patrols. But we must keep our schedules the same. There must not be whisperings that something is wrong in the in-between.
Audon's arrival was preluded by the sound of rattling bones. Air swirled around the dark and narrow chamber as the first of the new patrol groups waited to meet the virtuous Celtic god of decay. Hanging from all around the room on strings were fragments of clean white bones, teeth, and feathers. Like the other doors in Psychopomp Drive, the door to the immortal realm of Audon was nondescript and plain, lined with oak wood and sprigs of sage and ivy. White dust had been brushed over the doorknob, and it clung to Finley's hand as he turned it and walked into what could only have been described as a waiting room for the great beyond. Within the confines of the magical room were rows and rows of holly bushes, lush with red berries, their spiked leaves curved protectively around their prize, a warning to hungry herbivores. Tall oak trees carved out the part of the forest that could be seen, the rest vanishing high above the false ceiling. As it shimmered, Finley faintly wondered where the portal might lead. In front of them was an area designed to resemble a campsite, with large stones and logs serving as makeshift chairs around a glowing fire pit. Several souls raised their heads to watch them enter curiously, shifting over to grant them room to sit if they so wished. Ignoring the chivalry, Rykart moved past the entranceway and towards the edge of the spell, eyeing up the surface of the portal that lay just beyond them in the dark. The image of the forest here appeared blurred, and if he reached out a hand, he knew that it would pass right through to the other side, like trying to grasp the crystalline surface of a clear lake.
"We have come to seek an audience with our own,"
Rykart called, his voice holding its usual cool camber as it vanished into the world on the other side of the boundary. A few moments passed, and he stepped away from the portal again, his dark tail wagging behind him thoughtfully. The bones tinked above them like slivers of fine china, and Finley felt a sudden thrill rush through him. Though he had never been religious in the days before his death, being superstitious was a different matter entirely. Counting magpies, salt over the shoulder. Better to avoid those pavement cracks, just in case.
What's that sound?"
he whispered as a chill rushed from the tip of his tail to the very points of his ears. A voice echoed from all around them, hoarse as crinkling leaves.
"Are these the little Amarini that I was promised?"
One of the souls turned to look towards them and rolled her eyes good-naturedly. She was pale-skinned and freckled, her curls a natural shade of auburn red. She was smiling, shaking her head in amusement.
"He's a little overdramatic when it comes to entrances. Don't mind him."
A flourish from the other side of the portal had the Amarini leaping back to clear a space, the dark form of the god unfurling from the world beyond them like a hawk appearing from inside a hedgerow. Dressed in furs and straw, Audon smelled of warm meat and grass, hollowed out bones draped from around his neck, and rattled like wind chimes with every movement of his head. His face was blank and skull-like, though missing details such as a nose hole that might have characterized him as human. Wires crisscrossed over his exposed teeth, and white, beady eyes peered out through the deep sockets of his visual cavities. Thick, dark branches extended up from his head in all directions, like bizarre antlers. Black crow's feathers created a stark contrast where they framed the whiteness of his bones. Silver charms rang like bells against his bare rib cage. His surprisingly human hands raised up in the traditional stance of boo. The god brought himself closer to Finley, his breath deep and echoing against his rib cage. The Amarini swallowed as those tiny eyes pinned him to the spot.
Hi there,
he squeaked.
Enough of the theatrics, Sauron,
Rykart sniffed.
You give the poor kid a heart attack.
The god pulled back from Finley's personal bubble, adjusting his elaborate clothing with a shake and a clatter.
You are absolutely no fun, Griffith,
he whined in a voice that was the opposite to the one he had used before.
Do you know how very seldom it is that I get the chance for first introductions? Nobody worships the old gods anymore.
His eyes turned in Finley's direction, and the young man adjusted the collar of his coat, trying to hide his embarrassment.
If it makes you feel any better, I think my non-existent heart just stopped.
A booming laugh escaped from under the god's bone mask, jostling the natural decorations that hung around his broad body.
It feels good to terrorize again,
he agreed. Rykart cleared his throat, folding his arms across his slender chest.
Saulo mentioned that you might be able to assist us with some of our patrols in the in-between.
Bah!
The god waved him off, gliding across the waiting room like he was weightless or buoyant.
It's always business with you, Griffith, never taking the time to come around for a cup of tea.
There are more pressing matters,
the tall Amarini responded coolly, his accent softening the words.
Yes, so I've heard,
Aran crooned, coming to rest on one of the logs by the door.
A new hollow. Dreadful news.
A new one? The spirit on the log next to him questioned, surprise in her voice. I thought there were only two kinds.
Apparently not,
Aran added, waving a hand in the direction of their visitors.
Apparently, these fine feline fellows have stumbled across a new breed, something wonderfully dangerous.
Rykart's shoulders tensed.
Best not to worry,
he answered, his tone clipped.
The situation is being handled as we speak.
And that's where I come in, is it?
Aran quipped. The second spirit by the campfire, a man of Asian descent in his mid to late 60s, handed the god a small ceramic cup, which he accepted eagerly. Aran brought it up towards his teeth, a long black tongue rolling out through the gaps in the bone to lap at the contents. He let out a pleased gasp.
Are you sure I can't interest you gentlemen in a cuppa? My grim Mr. Hisaki here makes an excellent brew.
Mr. Hisaki nodded his head at the praise, his genial smile stretching from ear to ear.
We'd better not. Our patrol is in less than an hour,
Finley said, raising both hands apologetically.
Believe me, I'd much rather be drinking tea than heading out in that rain again. Rain?
The god cooed. He leaned back in the air behind the log, as if an invisible chair was holding him aloft.
It has been a good many years since I have experienced rain. An odd concept, don't you think? Water falling from the sky like that.
I never really thought about it,
Finley admitted. Reichardt groaned from next to him, trailing a hand across his face.
Oh, please don't encourage him,
he insisted. The creature waved a hand dismissively.
All right. I promised I would go, and I shall.
He took another noisy slurp of his beverage before placing the empty cup back into Mr. Hisaki's waiting hands. He rose from the log like smoke, floating effortlessly towards them. He turned to face the spirits that served as his grims over one bony shoulder, pointing a clawed finger in their direction.
House rules apply here. You two are in charge until my return. If any lost souls come wandering in, direct them towards the portal. The folks on the other side can do the rest.
The female spirit smiled as she accepted her own steaming cup from Mr. Hisaki. Yeah, boss. We'll hold down the fort, but we're going to expect souvenirs from the living world.
That can be arranged,
Aaron chirped excitedly, brushing up against Finley's side. The creature was cold and wet in the way that freshly sliced meat was. The young man tried his best not to show his revulsion, holding his breath so that he wouldn't gag. The god placed both hands behind his back as two long, pale-skinned legs materialized beneath his fur and grass cloak, descending to the ground to hold his weight. He hopped on the spot as if testing the limbs, his bones crackling under the skin like bubble wrap. Satisfied with his findings, he fell in behind them and watched as Reichardt pulled the door open to the rest of Psychopomp Drive. Finley jumped, startled, as a low rumble formed behind his right shoulder. Alarm bells racing in his mind before he realized just what the sound was. The god of the dead was purring. To be continued in Chapter 16.